Judges. Chapter 7. Then Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was to their north, by the hill of Moreh, in the valley. And Jehovah said to Gideon, The people with you are too many for me to deliver Midian into their hand. Israel might vaunt himself against me, saying, My own hand has saved me. Now then proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, Whoever is afraid and trembling should return and depart from here. And 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. Then Jehovah said to Gideon, The people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And he of whom I say to you, This one shall go with you, he shall go with you. And every one of whom I say to you, This one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water. And Jehovah said to Gideon, Everyone who laps from the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set apart, likewise everyone who bows down on his knees to drink. And the number of those who lapped the water into their mouth with their hand was 300 men, but the rest of the people bowed down on their knees to drink water. And Jehovah said to Gideon, Through the 300 men who lapped I will save you, and I will deliver Midian into your hand. But let all the other people go, each to his own place. Then the people took provisions in their hand and their trumpets, and he sent all the men of Israel away, each to his own tent, but retained the 300 men. And the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. And that night Jehovah said to him, Arise, go down against the camp, for I have delivered it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down with Purah your young man into the camp. And you will hear what they are saying. Then afterward your hands will be strengthened so that you can go down against the camp. So he went down with Purah his young man to the edge of the battle array that was in the camp. Now the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east lay in the valley like a locust swarm in multitude, and their camels were without number, as the sand on the seashore is in multitude. And when Gideon came, at that moment a man was recounting a dream to his companion, and he said, I have just had a dream. There was this round loaf of barley bread tumbling through the camp of Midian. And it came to the tent and struck it, so that it fell and turned upside down. And the tent collapsed. And his companion answered and said, This is nothing else but the sword of Gideon the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has delivered Midian and all the camp into his hand. And when Gideon heard the account of the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped. And he returned to the camp of Israel and said, Arise, for Jehovah has delivered the camp of Midian into your hand. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put trumpets into the hands of them all, as well as empty pitchers, with torches inside the pitchers. And he said to them, Look at me, and do as I do. Right when I come to the edge of the camp, you shall do just as I do. When I and all who are with me blow the trumpet, you also blow the trumpets around all the camp and say, For Jehovah and for Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch. They had just then posted the watch. And they blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers that were in their hands. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and shattered the pitchers, and they held the torches in their left hands, and the trumpets were in their right hands to blow. And they cried out, A sword for Jehovah and for Gideon. And each man stood in his place around the camp. Then the whole camp ran off, and they shouted and fled. And they blew the 300 trumpets, and Jehovah set each man's sword against his companion and against the whole camp. And the camp fled as far as Bethshittah toward Zererah, as far as Abel-meholah, by Tabbath. And the men of Israel were called up from Naphtali and from Asher and from all of Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. Then Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country of Ephraim, saying, Come down against Midian, and seize the waters against them as far as Bethbarah and the Jordan. And every man of Ephraim was called up, and they seized the waters as far as Bethbarah and the Jordan. And they captured 2 princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. And they slew Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb they slew at the winepress of Zeb, and they pursued Midian. And they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. Judges. Chapter 8. Then the men of Ephraim said to him, Why have you done this thing to us, that you did not call us when you went to battle against Midian? And they contended with him sharply. And he said to them, What have I done now to compare with you? Are not the gleanings of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? It was into your hand that God gave the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. And what was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their hostile spirit toward him subsided when he said this word. Then Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, he and the 300 men with him, weary yet pursuing. And he said to the men of Succoth, Please give us loaves of bread for the people behind me, for they are weary and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your hand now, that we should give bread to your army? And Gideon said, Because of this, when Jehovah does deliver Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will trample your flesh on the thorns of the wilderness and the briars. Then he went up from there to Peniel and spoke to them in the same way, and the men of Peniel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. And he spoke also to the men of Peniel, saying, When I return in peace, I will break down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their camps were with them, about 15,000 men, all who were left of the entire camp of the children of the east, for there had fallen 120,000 men who drew the sword. And Gideon went up by way of the tent dwellers, east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and he struck the camp when the camp was off guard. And Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued after them. And he captured the 2 kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and threw all the camp into confusion. And when Gideon the son of Joash returned from battle from the ascent of Heres, he captured a young man from among the men of Succoth and questioned him. And he wrote down for him the princes of Succoth and its elders, 77 men. Then he came to the men of Succoth and said, Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, concerning whom you taunted me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your hand now, that we should give bread to your men who are weary? And he took the elders of the city and the thorns of the wilderness and the briars, and with them he trampled the men of Succoth. And he broke down the tower of Peniel and slew the men of the city. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, What were the men whom you slew in Tabor like? And they said, As you are, so were they. Each one was like the children of a king in form. And he said, They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As Jehovah lives, if you had kept them alive, I would not slay you. And he said to Jether his firstborn, Rise up, slay them. But the youth would not draw his sword, because he was fearful, for he was still a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, You rise up, and fall on us, for there is as much strength as there is man. And Gideon rose up and slew Zebah and Zalmunna. And he took the crescents that were on their camels' necks. And the men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson as well, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. Jehovah will rule over you. And Gideon said to them, Let me make a request of you, that each of you give me an earring from his spoil. The Midianites had golden earrings, for they were Ishmaelites. And they said, We will willingly give it. And they spread out a garment, and each of them threw an earring from his spoil there. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold. This was besides the crescents and the pendants and the purple garments that were upon the kings of Midian, and besides the chains that were on their camels' necks. And Gideon made an ephod with it and placed it in his city, in Ophrah. And all Israel went as harlots to it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his house. So Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, and they lifted up their heads no more. And the land had rest 40 years in the days of Gideon. Then Jerubbaal the son of Joash went and dwelt in his house. And Gideon had 70 sons, the issue of his loins, for he had many wives. And his concubine who was in Shechem also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. And Gideon the son of Joash died at a good old age, and he was buried in the tomb of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. And as soon as Gideon died, the children of Israel turned again and went as harlots after the Baals. And they made Baal-berith their god. And the children of Israel did not remember Jehovah their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies all around. Nor did they show mercy to the house of Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, for all the good he had done to Israel.